This. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of AI Insiders, and got a very special guest, someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for a long time, and whose home I've had the pleasure being in, and whose tours of one of the greatest museums in the world I've had the pleasure of going on. So this should be a lot of fun, especially once I saw what Sree is doing in the AI space and how he's educating marketers and others. I was like, well, come on, you gotta stop by our neck of the woods sometime. So Sree, good to see you any chance I get, and yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, well, if you want to maybe give a slightly more precise intro, at least for what you're up to these days, because you always
Sure.
have a lot of hats. So
Thank you. And hi, David. And hello, everybody. Great to be here. David's an optimistic person who, when he flew both Frontier and Spirit on the same journey, on the same trip. So that's amazing. And he has something positive to say. So that's an upbeat, positive person. I am delighted to be with everyone here. I hope this will be a good chance to ask lots of questions and for me to learn as much as everyone else. I was, as you heard, the Chief Digital Officer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, working on the future of culture. And before that, I was a professor and Chief Digital Officer at Columbia Journalism School and then the university, working on the future of education. And then after that, I was the CDO of New York City, working on the future of cities and citizens. For the last 8 years, I've been working on my own small social digital marketing agency. We do social digital consulting and a lot of training as well, helping folks understand this AI moment. And I'm happy to follow David's lead on how he'd like to set this up.
yeah, well, and so what are the kinds of things that people are asking you the most questions about these days?
Sure. I just came back from about 3 cities in India where I was doing workshops on AI and how to use them, how to use it. And we happened to be together on the day that on the Monday after the DeepSeek announcements and kind of the unleashing of DeepSeek on the world. And as much as America is obsessed with China now, for those of you who follow international geopolitics, India is really focused on what China is up to at any moment. And so there was a lot of attention being paid to DeepSeek and its potential and its problems and its challenge to the US. I actually have, let me see if I can pull this up here. uh, something that I showed the folks there that the day that this happened. Let's see here if I can. Yeah, here we go. And so this was a slide I showed them before the markets opened in the U.S.
Mhm.
The first two items, and then the last one is from less than from just over an hour ago today. Shows you that same theme of where DeepSeek is, what does it mean, where is it going, what does it mean to the world is still, here we are almost a week, 10 days later, people are still talking about it. And so that was something that people are really trying to understand there. And similar to the question that I've been getting from journalists ever since this happened.
And well, so I'm glad you brought it up because sometimes some of these calls have a little bit more of like a set theme to it, and we actually haven't gotten to have as candid a conversation about DeepSeek yet. And also for framing it, yeah, I'm seeing like a mix of like this is a cataclysmic event for U.S. tech and like all hell China now, the new AI leaders, to this doesn't matter so much for US tech because, well, like, first of all, US companies and a lot of Western folks don't, especially right now, are wary of doing business with China, especially when it comes to something sensitive like data. Others saying, like, this is actually good for everyone because, first of all, it's never good for one country to essentially like, monopolize a major resource, but also beyond that, uh, 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 competition in general. It's going to make everyone better. Yeah, and clearly, multiple things can be true at once, which is hard for people to reckon with. But uh, do you have your own opinion, and do you have your own sense of like what advice you give? Also, I'll even say it. I know this is a multi-part question, but do you even wind up having a different answer for companies in India versus the US? Like, I'm curious how you think about this.
Sure. And I want to acknowledge that there are obviously lots of people in the room who know a lot more about this and other topics than I do. So I appreciate the chance, as I said, for all of us to share their thoughts. And please jump in the chat as well. And please post things that we should all be reading and know about. I think this is a moment where everything that we were sort of presuming we knew about where generative AI was going for at least the next year or so kind of got upended. And as you said, it's not clear what all this means. I was watching a video that showed, even though when you ask DeepSeek, it says it does not send any of your data to China, where you can see the data being transmitted to China at that moment. And to people outside of America who learned the lessons from the dot-com boom and bust and from the social media time where, or the rise of social media, where power and attention and money got concentrated in Silicon Valley. Uh, for a lot of people in the world, this is been seen as a good corrective measure. They don't think China is the right place necessarily, but they look at this and say, "Look, this is good, especially at the price point and everything else, the speed at which it was done." But of course, there have been also some interesting moments to watch as some companies that have gone out of their way to build their their models on scraping content from copyright holders, complaining about DeepSeek, using their models and using their materials and their data. So that was an interesting moment as well for India itself, where which has done really well in the tech space as providing services, there's been some renewed consternation about why it is that China was able to build DeepSeek and not a country like India. And that's partly because India has focused so much on the services industry rather than on building this kind of effort. And so that's also an interesting moment. I'll show you what a couple of things I showed the folks that day. Remember now, this is from 10 days ago, just before the market opened and everything else. So I was just trying to. I tell everyone when you see a new AI tool that you want to test, I tell them the same thing I said at the rise of search engines back in 98, 99
Hi,
when
hi, Sree.
yes.
I'm so sorry for interrupting you. I just keep seeing the title slide. Are other people seeing that?
Uh, oh, and
Wait, are you not seeing the DeepSeek slide?
I'm seeing the three headlines slide.
Yeah, sorry. That's where we are right now. I think somehow somebody's seeing the previous the
No, no. Keep going. You were saying you're showing a chart or something. My
no
apologies.
no
Keep.
no no no, it's
This is
okay.
great. This is great.
It's
I
okay.
apologize.
No apologies needed. So as I always tell people that you should when websites came out, I used to teach workshops. I'll just quickly show you. This is how I used to look when I started teaching technology. I used to have hair. Computers used to look like that. And when how to use the web, when I used to do these workshops around the world, I would say, investigate or click into a new search engine and test on something where you have expertise on a topic, subject area, maybe your job, and then test it to see how good it is. And I say the same thing about these AI models, AI platforms. Search something and sometimes what you know is just see what it knows about you, like we used to do. Some of the younger people here won't believe that Alta Vista and Yahoo were so dominant as search engines before Google came along. Journalists used to love a tool called Dogpile,
Oh, I love
and we would
Dogpile.
we would hold workshops on why you should try Google. We had to kind of force people to try Google because they loved the status quo, whatever they were using, they were happy with. And so that's a lesson for where we are today. So I'm going to just go back, oops, sorry, and just show you here what I did. I went in and said, tell me about Sree Sreenivasan in DeepSeek. And I noticed that my birthday it made me 4 years older than I am, and said I was born in India. I was born in Japan. So that was a mistake. So I said, all right. And I noticed that some of this was in the past tense. It says was a prominent journalist. My career was mostly correct here. That's fine. I'm reading this, my media contribution is all good. And then
Oh,
I didn't
no.
see the thing in the middle where it said I died in September 9th, 2020, after a battle with cancer, and my death was widely mourned in the journalism and digital media communities. And you can see more, there's more stuff on there. And I was like, what's going on here? Because I've certainly seen mistakes on other channels, other platforms, but this was the first time that I had died. And in a way, it was really nice because having lost my mother 2 years ago, I always say that kind of funerals are wasted on the dead. They don't hear the nice things people say about them. But here, I got to see some nice things said about me. And I know when I died, people said a lot of nice things, even after my battle with cancer.
Did you ask to see if it had a transcript of the eulogies?
Yeah, exactly. I should have said show me the eulogies, and it would have generated them, I'm sure. And this is the problem that someone like me, who's been on the internet for decades, 30 years or so, it's very easy to find accurate information about me, including my date of birth is on my Wikipedia page. So the fact that it's this wrong about this one thing is fascinating. But even I didn't notice that it was written in the past tense till I came upon this particular line. And so those are that landscape of people being excited about this, people being worried about it, people taking the side of these of the now older platforms. It's hard to think of Perplexity, Gemini, Anthropic, all of these, and many of them are complaining about what DeepSeek has done. It's just kind of fascinating at this moment. David?
And I am also curious if anyone here is preferring DeepSeek, over the Chat GPTs and Geminis and Perplexities of the world. Like if you're like now that we're, I mean, like the hype cycle is so fast for some of these things, and so I felt like in the also like in the first couple hours after all this uh, all this market value erased. But then and people are like, yeah, here are the things I'm using DeepSeek for now, and I'm like done with the other end. But then like 3 hours after that, like I hadn't heard anything since, and maybe they realized too many of too many of them and their clients have all been marked as deceased or something. Uh, but is anyone and it's not a bad right. I don't want to like have that skeptical tone of voice here, but because if it is being used for something, like yeah, I'm looking at my own DeepSeek queries, and it is like try well for me, I've also always got my own differentiation issues. It instantly looks for it tells me about another David Berkowitz. But then for me though, when I asked who is David Berkowitz, the marketer, it did say that I worked at Dentsu and MRY, which are correct, but also Crispin Porter Bogusky. So that was new for me. And it also said that I host the Serial Marketer podcast, which I have never I've been avowedly not a. This is actually the closest series I've had to a podcast, and I don't call it one, and it's not under that name. So, um, but I will see the pick me up though was that it said David Berkowitz is active in the marketing community, often mentoring young professionals and advocating for diversity and inclusion in the industry. And I'm like as a very pro DEI person, and yeah, like that was one political statement I'm happy to make if it's political. Like, okay, I'll take some of this. Yeah.
But now you might get in trouble for having that be known about. That's one thing if that's one of the things you're known about.
Hey,
That's the
Look, if this is why
reality.
someone doesn't hire me because Chinese AI says I'm pro DEI, I'm like, I'll take that hallucination any day of the week. Yeah.
Can we just talk about hallucinations for a moment? And as we know, that's the term that's preferred to describe what you just saw with DeepSeek with me. I am anti-hallucination as a term, even though everybody uses it. Yeah, hallucinations make the sound as some kind of mirage or something soft or oh, it's just too bad when these are mistakes, errors, big effing deals.
Mhm.
And so I'm on a one-man mission to try to end the term hallucination with no luck because everybody uses that. But it just, for the layperson hearing the word hallucination, just I think gets these platforms off the hook. Like, oh, this is just, we have nothing to do with it. This is just a hallucination. So I'm curious what other people think of that. And you, David, as well.
I, I've created a RAG chatbot, so I've been looking at this for quite a bit. I mean, I have an engineering background, and as an engineer in the old days, when you engineer something, you expected to get the results that your programs were programmed to do. And what is clear about this technology is that it works on probability. So when you have a large data set, there's no way really to take a large data set and then make sure that there are no mistakes out of it, because you can't really engineer the questions that come out of it. What you can do is when you control the content and you can optimize the prompt to a point where you don't have hallucination, especially if it's your own data set. I don't know if it's possible to create a system on the entire internet that is always going to give you the right answers based on how the technology works.
Wouldn't it be good if they could just say we don't know, right? Like that would be we know up to this much, we don't know the rest. They fill in that blank that they have, and that's where
It's probability, right? So they take the words and they use probability in order to figure out what the next word is. And they just don't, I mean, AI is not intelligent. People think it's intelligent. They just dump more data to get more accurate answers, but it's never going to be perfect. It's close, and if you use it for the right types of applications, it's very valuable. But to depend on it as an intelligent entity, I think is just a fool's game.
let me react to two things. One, what David mentioned is, there was this kind of instant attention given to DeepSeek. Are people still using it? Sort of, is it the Apple Vision Pro of AI platforms? Everybody was talking about it, but you haven't heard about it since, right? Since the opening flurry of when it was launched. So that's one question. The second is this idea of these platforms, how they work and what they do. They're constantly changing, and we are, as users, not sure where to go and how to use them at the right moment for the right tools, right? So we're constantly trying to find them. I'll step back and give you another example from the media. In there was a big scandal in the New York Times of a journalist named Jason Blair. Some of you will remember this, where
Oh
he
yeah.
was a serial fabulist. Would he wrote hundreds of stories where he made up quotes from real people, and he made them up. And when there was a big investigation and a giant report written, all of that, a managing editor at the New York Times lost his job because of Jason, etc. They went back and interviewed people who had been quoted by Jason, who he had never met, but he would say, David Berkowitz says marketing is the most important industry in the 21st century, whatever, something innocuous. And they would ask David, David, why didn't you call the Times and say, I never spoke to Jason? And that the David in this example would say, it was an innocuous thing. I was happy to be quoted in the Times. I didn't know I could call anybody. And so, that's kind of human nature. And so people have asked me immediately, their first thought was, why didn't you correct this? And like, I've not even started to even think about I was traveling and stuff, but where would I go? What would I do? How would I do this? So that's also the thing where if the hallucination or the mistake isn't that bad, people just let it slide. They
Well,
won't.
and then and my one of my top five movies of all time getting into this is Shattered Glass.
Mhm.
Uh, uh,
With Stephen Glass, another fabulist, right?
Stephen Glass, The New Republic. And if you haven't seen that, it is one of I just rewatched it a few weeks ago, and just Hayden Christensen is someone who's making stuff up when there are all these other fact checkers and editors and everyone who just wanted to take someone seemingly trustworthy at their word, um, and but it was just like it just finally just like a few things not passing a sniff test for someone, but like it wasn't that hard. Like anyone watching the movie sees like once the unraveling starts, it's like it's very clear that this unraveling it should have taken like 5 minutes, not months or however long it took to uh, undo um, yeah, his career. Just that like denouement side, and it's crazy, but like yeah, it's like people don't want to look, and yeah, nowadays like even the truth is subjective, and so it's like and then is that one of the problems, right? Like if AI is no less trustworthy than anything else. Yeah. Uh, then like how big a deal is it, right? Like I mean, these are questions that I think we have to ask. I'm blanking on the source because I've written and spoken about this somewhere, but that like it was a great newsletter about this where it's like once that people's tolerance for these errors is increasing, right? Like so even if the tech is supposed to be getting better, and then it's like, okay, once you know you've got to take something with a grain of salt, or like if you're showing your boss something really important, you've got to find another couple of sources too. But otherwise, yeah. Eh.
Yeah, I think that's those are, and I'd love to hear what other people have to say. I asked for a photo. This is ChatGPT, where I asked for photos of me and Elvis. I don't know who looks worse, Elvis or me. And here it got everything right about Elvis Presley, but it got the things about me so wrong. My late mother would have loved to have me be chief speechwriter for Bill Clinton, as well as the executive editor for the New York Times. And it just, obviously not even close. But this is the kind of thing that we see, and what are you supposed to do when confronted with this? Where like, see, it wasn't me. What are you can mark the thumbs down, but that doesn't correct the problem. It just generates something else.
Is that a picture of Elvis? Doesn't look like. Is that you?
That's me, and that's Elvis.
That doesn't look like Elvis.
Yeah, that's what I say. I don't know who looks worse. Hard to tell.
So so Sri, like where uh, are you seeing some of the most like just practical needs right now from folks you're talking to, beyond some of these things that'll be like, yeah, DeepSeek's big question today, maybe come March, it's just either in the background or not the hot button thing, right? Like,
Sure. I can talk a little bit about marketing in a moment, but I thought this is something. There's a slide that many of you have seen various versions of this that, here it's saying countries like Japan, 26%, 27% subject to AI-driven automation, meaning jobs lost, all the way down to India at 12%. And even if these things are off by, orders of magnitude, we're still talking about hundreds of millions of jobs. And I don't think this is being discussed in any serious way by companies, by or industry groups, by bureaucrats, by government, by anyone. Like, I don't think this is being discussed about what does this mean in any of these industries. Even if, 10 million people who lose, in America, if 10 million people lost their jobs, or 30 million, whatever these numbers are, directionally, they're right. The actual specifics may be much smaller, but I don't think we talk about that enough, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this.
Well, the one thing that I would point out is that if 10 million people lose their jobs, the economy will tank.
Mhm.
If people can't buy, it's not it's a dynamic system. Everything is related to everything else. And, the mindset is always more profit. But then on the other side, if the market isn't functioning and people can't buy products, then what's going to happen to the marketplace and to the company's profits? I mean, people are not, it just doesn't make any sense to me that people can't make that connection.
Other thoughts, folks?
I think the follow-on question is what to do about it. Been working with some large organizations with many thousands of employees, and they'll have mandates about cost reductions for all these different departments, but I don't think anybody knows yet how to like benchmark some of these things, right? There's that John Sfiocco Harvard Business Review article that talks about wins that's impacting work in that deals with words, images, numbers, or I can't remember what the S is for, but like the idea is like it's trying to separate out the stuff where the LLM is part and parcel to the product and more about the different departments that are going to be impacted. So I'm just curious if you have a sense or you feel like in talking to people, what are they most concerned about when they think about, okay, fine, a disturbingly high percentage share of work is going to be impacted by this? Like what are they either most concerned about there as the ripple effect through the workplace, or do they have some magical rubric or benchmark by which they're going to start measuring impact of AI driven efficiencies and adoption in departments? I hope that's not too long-winded a question.
Yeah, no, I can share some thoughts on what people I'm talking to, especially government folks in Singapore, the UAE. I think in countries like that, they are more focused on this issue. I found that in those two countries in particular, there's the technocrats or the bureaucrats are much smarter about tech and have been for the last 20, 30 years than Americans, for the most part, who, if you ever watched one of those hearings where Zuckerberg or Tim Cook or any of these people come in front of Congress. Do you remember the famous scene where, uh, like, basically some senator started?
Senator, we sell ads.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also Tim Cook was asked like for tech troubleshooting advice on how to improve the iPhone usage, like
Oh dear God.
the personal
Yeah.
iPhone usage by the
Yeah.
senator. So I think in those countries there's going to be more awareness. I mean, they're also small, tiny countries compared to the US, but they know the impact of these things, and therefore their leaders are really sharp on these topics and are thinking about it. Now, if you take aside the last 2 weeks and all the chaos in Washington, even before that, I would say we weren't prepared, and we don't our leaders were not thinking enough about these issues. And so I wonder what other folks think of that too. Meanwhile, while you're thinking about, I think John's point is really interesting about how the AI agents, which was another piece of news that came, I think, a few days before that, has been the DeepSeek news has distracted from it, and how everything's going to be about agents that you can create now with very little technology, are going to be going out and doing your work for you, and then my agents talking to your agents kind of thing. So, John, I'm curious what you have seen in those advances.
Yeah, and this,
Sorry, I was multitasking.
go ahead,
Um,
John.
He just sent his agent to do the to do
Yeah,
the
I should have done.
work.
There you go. That would have been a perfect example. It's not really me, it's my agent giving agency for me or acting for me. But I think that's the thing. There seems to be a lot going on in terms of how you tie AI together into workflow or collaborating agents that has enormous potential in solving real problems. And yet our focus now is being drawn back to the models. And sure, DeepSeek may outperform OpenAI, although we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes because it's coming out of China. So there's a lack of transparency there other than what's been published in paper and so on. So we're jumping to a lot of conclusions about DeepSeek and others like Gwen from Alibaba, and no doubt others will see. And it's drawing our attention because of the potential for it to be a little bit better at a bit of a lower cost. And these other advances are, which could be much more significant, both on the upside and downside for society, are not being watched as they happen. Agents can automate workflows, automate a lot of the work that gets done, particularly sort of procedural work, and already is in some cases. You're already seeing some interesting examples, and the attention's being drawn away from that right now. Now, weeks time, it may be drawn back again. The whole DeepSeek thing may all blown over in a week or two. We're very much in the moment with news stories like this, and a couple of weeks later, forget about them.
Yeah, and to these points, like they're also it's like this if we're in some kind of snowball's path where it's like some things are bound to change, right? Like when and to me some of it the most familiar version of which won't even seem as dramatic by comparison, but like especially from a marketing context, when that shift to mobile started coming in earnest, right? And so it was like how and it's like how long after the debut of the iPhone in '07 was that shift going to happen? Like for news, sports, weather, people started gravitating to it more quickly. For things like productivity or booking a flight or groceries or finding a car, like all these kinds of things took way longer. But there was that pretty significant shift. And then, for marketers, you have less screen real estate to reach someone. You have some also advanced targeting functionality, like you might know very precise location on the device and things like that. And it might have various kinds of like attribution that you can now tell if there are different devices in the same household and can actually target some things better than you could. Obviously, that's a moving target now, but there were some things where it's like once that was out of the box, like there's no going back to this like desktop first world. With AI and with agents in particular, once we get to the point where it's like my agent's talking to your agent, right? Like the one of the things I wonder about so much is serendipity. How predictable are we? How programmable are we as people? And does that vary based on the person? We've heard Jeremiah Ouyang talk about AI agents here, and I recommend reading a lot of his work. And I had him as a guest in another group I'm a part of, and so he liked to use me as an example of how this Allbirds devotee, and and yes, I do have quite a few pairs of them. It's like one of my Cyber Monday splurges, and so it kind of adds up, and got a nice rainbow of them in my closet. But at the time he was saying this, I sadly don't have this on me right now, but I lifted up the footwear I had on, and it was this ridiculous tiger foot slipper that I got at Walmart in upstate New York when I was staying there on vacation 3 years ago, and I've never bought anything like it before. I don't know that I will again. Like I'm not usually in that place, that time, all of this stuff, and uh, like, but would AI know to fetch that for me, right? Like, yeah, if I said I'm away right now, it's cold. I need slippers before I go to bed tonight. Like, find me something. Yeah. Is it just gonna do what like 46-year-old Manhattan residents with some of my purchase history would get, or would it know me so well that it's like it's got to try to surprise me too, right? And maybe even use that to try to almost like trick me to see if it can get to know me better. Yeah.
Maybe one day, but not yet. I'll just say one thing about Allbirds. Since we've been talking, we're in the everybody's a marketer here, or most people are. The Frontier Spirit Airlines conversation was interesting earlier, and now you mentioned Allbirds. I had something funny happen in December. I got a pair of Allbirds that came in the mail to me, and it had my name and my right address. And I called them to say, "Is this a gift from somebody? Why do I have it?" And they said, "We can't tell you, but we'll contact the sender." And they did, and it turned out to be someone I know, and somehow their assistant who had sent me a gift long ago sent it to the wrong part. The amazing part wasn't that it was somebody I knew, but that they sent me for my trouble, they said, a new pair of shoes, like another pair of shoes, and said, since you return that, we're going to give you one. That in the middle of all of this, like customer service really matters. Like, the delight and surprise. And in this case, I was not even really a customer, though I've been a fan. It's just so interesting that that still matters. And this was the lowest level agent that I was talking to on the phone who was empowered to say, somebody who helped our other customer should get a free pair of shoes. So that let's not lose sight in all of the things we talk about with technology, that if our services and our products and the people we work with and for have that kind of let's do things right by the customer, then we still have a shot at being relevant and useful in this crazy world.
It's
I think the thing we have to think about though is everyone is different. So these things are going to work better for some people than others.
Mhm.
So some people will care about that relationship and the emotional angle. Others will prefer that's not there in some cases or ambivalent to it, in which case the automation plays into their hands. So we always tend to characterize too many things as if everyone is the same and it has the same impact on everyone.
Fair enough.
I don't know if you guys have experience with Tesla. I just bought a Tesla and they do everything through the app. And when things go wrong, there's nobody to talk to. There's no recourse. So relying on technology, and then when you're not happy, what do you do? Who do you talk to? There's nobody to talk to.
You DM Elon, I guess,
You
or you
know,
can find online,
The
and
same
Elon.
with Amazon.
yeah. I don't know about that experience. Maybe, sending a gift to someone, but what if there's real problem and you need to resolve it and it can't resolve it for you? What do you do then?
I mean, some of this is also just who is your customer? If your customer values that level of service, then that's typically going to come at a premium price. You pay for it. If you don't care about it and you're more interested in the lower price, you're probably going to get a lower service. Now, sometimes technology can close that gap, but often it doesn't.
But then again, like I mean, I think to Sree's point, if you look at just like so many of the memorable brands over the years and that have emerged, and you look at some like tech powered brands Zappos and Warby Parker, and you see like just like how quick Airbnb CEO is to respond to things like the fires in LA, and just before this started recording, Sree and I were talking about stopovers in Abu Dhabi, and like I mean, I was on a 2 week trip uh, with my family 6 years ago, and one of the most memorable things that happened, maybe the most memorable thing that happened, was just the staff in an airport lounge after midnight just being so thoughtful toward my daughter. And like, with all the wonderful hospitality we had across Southeast Asia, and a beautiful place and wonderful trip. And I'm like, I can't get the airport lounge out of my head. And it was just because it was people acting as people. And like, can we, try to put a premium around that? Yeah, maybe a little idealistic, but like Sree, I just love the sentiment.
Did everyone read Gene's note about the Josh Hawley's crazy proposed law that he's proposed bill that he's put together? Do you want to talk
What's
about that?
it could be hard to keep track. What's the latest?
Gene, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. It's just Josh Hawley is proposing a law that would be $1 million fine to any individual using DeepSeek and $100 million fine for businesses.
So how do you police this, and how will they do that? What'll they do? I mean, this is what's been so interesting is that folks who represent a political viewpoint that government should be hands off, let these companies flourish, let them do whatever they want, are now, now this looks like you'll have to go into people's browser histories to to police
It,
them. It's really
it's going to be a
amazing.
lot more searches for like what is the best, most secure VPN. Like, I mean, and it's funny because yeah, I think like the time I thought about that the most was when I I traveled to China, and I'm like, okay, like what kind of VPN should I get? What am I going to have access to? What shouldn't I use? What can I use if it's it, right? And to think that people coming here might be having the same questions.
I mean, honestly, David, if you're traveling abroad, you shouldn't even use your personal phone. You should use a burner. There was
Mhm.
that case where a woman from New York who's a citizen of the United States, um, whatever the security service is called these days in Russia, confiscated her phone, looked at her history, and saw that she had donated $50 to a pro-Ukrainian organization while in New York City and arrested her.
Yeah. Well, there's some places where, especially certain times, might not be the best travel, but if you have to, yeah, I think that's
I think the standard thing is now if you're an American executive going to China, you don't carry your laptop, or I mean, or your local team there will give you ones to use there and not the phones from here, your equipment from the
yeah.
US. Standard.
Um,
I,
uh, Other questions for Sree or comments on all this?
I mean, first of all, I just want to say I've never heard the expression all hat, no cattle, and I love it. That's pretty awesome.
You'd spend more
Um,
time in Texas.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Dan Rather would say it on the CBS Evening News. I think that's when I first heard it myself.
Really? I never heard that. It's great. I guess, I'm more of a cynic and in terms of data collection and feeling like everybody's got access to all my data. I mean, Grubhub was just hacked. And so, everybody knows my order history and my credit card number and everything else. And it feels impossible to stop that. And, Sri, I'm curious, your work in government and other places, how do you look at data privacy and protection? And, is it a pipe dream? Is it possible for us to actually protect our own data?
Yeah, it was a great question, and I don't think it is, because this is not a priority in most companies, right? Like if you are on Safari, you'll see like they'll show you in the last 30 days, I'm just looking at it now, trackers prevented, how many companies were tracking me right now, what's going on, how many breaches there have been. That it tells you all of that in their privacy report setting. And I think that not enough companies care about this. Even as more and more companies have appointed chief security officers, chief, all of these kinds of people with the right cybersecurity titles and everything else, that we are seeing uh, uh, these breaches, and we're also seeing that there can also be innocuous things that do real damage. If you remember last year, there was an outage caused by Microsoft. Somebody, it was not by Microsoft, but I think the company is called CrowdStrike. That was, they were just doing a routine update that then caused Microsoft servers around the world to collapse. And in India, they were still talking about it because it lasted a lot longer there than it did here. And so the the punishment for these things are not high enough in either customer uh, punishment or by the government, by regulators, that these companies will do their best, I think, or think they're doing their best, but they're not doing enough to prevent these. So I think that you're more optimistic than I am that this can actually be ended, that there will be a time will come when these are not issues. Because in addition to the bad actors, there's just everyday things that can go wrong. About 4 years ago, there was a major Facebook outage that was caused by just someone doing something simple, a simple routine, and an update inside Facebook, and it just the meltdown happened. So I think that's where we are today, unfortunately.
But
Uh,
but you do have in Europe the new, was it DORA regulations around business resilience. So again, there are things being done outside the US, but the
Mhm.
US these things is getting in the way of doing business and getting in the way of making profits. So no one pays attention to them
And
unless
should
they have
we give
to
a shout
because
out?
they're
Yeah.
operating in Europe, unless in which case they'll also tend to do it in the US because it just makes sense to do it. But if you're not impacted by these regulations from elsewhere, you tend to just see them as something that is going to get in the way of doing things.
I'll just say we should be all grateful to Europe for taking these concerns seriously, including the reason why Facebook and a lot of these platforms allow you to download your history is because regulators in Europe had made a fuss. So in a lot of these areas, Europe is ahead of where we are, and that's a very important point. Thank you.
How many of you guys have heard of techno-feudalism? That's a topic that Yanis Varoufakis talks about.
There's a long essay that maybe David can circulate that I see it on multiple lists just this week where people are talking
yeah.
about.
I shared a link from a talk that he had that, the real danger is not DeepSeek, but are the cloud platforms, the Amazons and the Ubers and the Facebooks that have all of your data and basically extract rent from you for accessing the cloud on information that you put in there. And that is the real danger to the marketplace. And it's quite obvious. Click on that link and watch the video. It's very insightful.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, Sree, just in the closing few minutes, um, can you just share a bit of your perspective? I know we're mostly talking about marketing here, but the marketers are dependent on the media, and journalism is supposed to be a hallmark of that. And I what's your take on like where the field of journalism is in the US right now and like where it's going in the near midterm? How optimistic, pessimistic are you? Like what are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, journalism is in deep trouble in so many ways. Recently, we saw about 250 newspapers shut down across the US last year. Um, New Jersey lost one the print editions of two of its major newspapers just this month. And the rise of these news deserts is a big problem. One of the reasons why you're seeing the state of disinformation and misinformation in the US and around the world is because of the problems with funding of media in the US. I think that's a major problem. The idea that there will be enough small startup media organizations that can fill the breach, I think is not right. There will be some efforts to that, but we have to acknowledge that that traditional journalism is in trouble. At the same time, you go to places like my old place, Columbia Journalism School, or CUNY here in New York, the Newmark School, USC, other places. Young people still want to get into the media, still want to do journalism, still want to do that kind of work. So that's optimistic, but uh, where are the jobs going to be is going to be a major issue. I think the Washington Post, lost 200,000 subscribers over the fracas over the endorsement issue. The amount of effort it would take to get back even a tenth of those new readers, those subscribers, is almost impossible. I mean, the damage is so grave there, and we need strong news publications to go out. Today there was a thing that's going around on uh, on X and other places. They saw that USAID, there was a screenshot that said spent $4.1 million with Politico. So people are like, haha, look at this. Politico is getting money from USAID. In fact, that number was representing all government agencies that buy subscriptions to Politico Pro, which is a very good, very expensive service that they sell. So USAID's portion of that was minuscule, but that number then just takes a life of its own. And then people, so the way that these lies, or a little bit that sounds true, or maybe even true, and then is blown out of proportion, especially with people like Musk and others putting their thumb on the scale, that's where we're lost, I think, in many, many ways. And so, how do we counter that? I'm not sure, but I think we have to.
Well, Sree, I mean, there's a lot for many more conversations. I saw as you flip by, you've got your bit.ly/Sree. I also love custom bit.ly links. I use them for everything. And so I just put that in my own browser, and I'm like, yeah, there we go. We got a lot of the overview about you. But how can people best follow you? And
Yeah, I mean, my LinkedIn is, I just threw that in there. And then I also have a newsletter where I write about some of these issues, including why I'm still on X. So you can check that
uh,
out. I'll put the
yeah,
link. And
it's
I'll also, last thing, if we have, I know we only have a minute, but I'll just give you a screenshot of my takeaways on where we are with generative AI. So anyone can just grab a screenshot of it. The last point I'll just say, I say team human will prevail, but the question is, which humans? Will it be humans that don't care about other humans, or will it be humans who just care about themselves and what happened, the making money or having power that's going to matter. I think that's going to be something that we'll all learn our lessons in the next few months and years.
well, Sri, this is amazing. I mean, thank you for. I was just educating so many of us over so many waves, and just also bringing people together, and I mean, just all these kinds of forums online and off that you've done. So I'm just I mean, I am honored to have had the pleasure to continue to learn from you, and it's great to have you here
In
and
here.
come back anytime. And
Back at
thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
There's a
everyone.
great book tree. There's a great book tree you should check out called Bowling Alone. It's kind of about it's about the breakdown of society because of
Oh,
our lack of
sure.
civic participation.
Yeah, yeah. I used to recommend that, and What's the Matter with Kansas, for people to understand America back in the early 2000s.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Might see a few your first Wednesday tonight, and yeah, great to have you all here. So.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.